9. Eric Pierson. Eric Pierson was first convicted of murder in 1993. He beat and strangled 17-year-old Christina Whitaker in Davie, Florida. He was only 28 years old at the time he committed this heinous offense. He had been in and out of prison since he was a teenager. By the time he killed Christina, Pierson had already done time for attempted first-degree murder and armed burglary. In 1985, he broke into a woman's home and cut her throat. She survived, and he served just 4 years of an 18-year sentence. Pierson received a 40-year sentence for Christina's murder. He was released in 2020 after serving 27 years. Barely a year later, he was arrested again for allegedly killing 33-year-old Erica Verdecilla and throwing her body into a canal behind his house. She was a single mom. The repeat offender reportedly confessed to murdering Verdecilla with a screwdriver, which he used to stab her twice in the neck and once in each eye. Pierson claimed that he committed the act in self-defense, but it's hard to believe that the 6-foot 8-inch giant would need to defend himself against a woman who was 5'7" and weighed 160 pounds. A witness saw Erica with what they described as a grimy man at a sandwich shop shortly before her murder. They were also together during a traffic stop on the day she was killed. Pierson initially told police that they had parted ways at a gas station and that he had no idea where she went after that. But surveillance footage proved that the pair were at the gas station before police pulled them over, and that Pierson was lying. Officers found blood inside his pickup truck, and Pierson's girlfriend told them that he had made disturbing comments while staring at the canal where he dumped Erica's remains, including that the police had no case without a body. Erica's mother, Carmen, believes that Pierson had too many second chances and that he shouldn't have been free in the first place when he murdered her daughter. It's an understandable sentiment, one that many people probably agree with. 8. Arthur BOMAR. In 1978, Arthur BOMAR got into an argument over a parking space in Las Vegas and ended up killing someone. He served 11 years for it and then moved to Pennsylvania in 1990 to be near his family. BOMAR was arrested later that year for allegedly pulling a woman out of her car and assaulting her. In 1993, he was convicted for assault after getting in a bar fight. These arrests should have gotten his parole revoked, but BOMAR's crimes flew under the radar, and that's unfortunate because if he had been sent back to prison, it would have stopped him from killing again. He murdered 22-year-old Amy Willard in 1996 while she was on her way home from a night out with friends. The victim's car was found on a highway exit in Pennsylvania. There was a pool of blood nearby, along with Amy's panties and shoes. Her body was found 17 miles away in a garbage-strewn parking lot in North Philadelphia. She had been beaten and raped. Detectives investigated numerous leads, but the case went cold for 2 years. A break finally came when BOMAR hit a woman while driving. They both pulled over, and he tried persuading her to get out of the car, but she refused and instead memorized the plate number. It was registered to BOMAR, but the car belonged to Maria Cabuenos, who had gone missing that year. BOMAR was convicted of Amy's murder based on DNA evidence and was sentenced to death. He denies having any role in the crime and is in the process of appealing his sentence. 7. Stephen Pratt. One day in 1984, 15-year-old Stephen Pratt shot and killed his neighbor. He was given a 30-year prison sentence and was released in 2016. The 45-year-old returned to his old neighborhood, where his 64-year-old mother, Gwendolyn Pratt, lived. Stephen's family accepted him back with open arms and even threw him a welcome home party. And he showed his appreciation, or lack of it, by killing his mother just 2 days after his release. She died from blunt force trauma to the head. A neighbor told CBS News that before the murder, Stephen had gotten into an argument with his aunt and asked his cousin if he could stay at their home. He had just gotten out of prison and things were already going badly. The repeat offender immediately expressed remorse at his initial court appearance. He admitted to killing his mom and said, "I have failed. I don't want a trial. I'm guilty." Stephen pleaded guilty to manslaughter and received a 25-year sentence, which he must serve 85% of before he'll be considered for parole. 6. David Edward MAUST. Life got off to a rough start for David Edward MAUST. His mother dropped him off at a mental institution when he was 9 years old. He then went to a children's home, where he was abused by a teenager. His history of violence goes back to childhood, when he choked 2 other kids and tortured a squirrel. MAUST joined the U.S. Army as a young adult and was stationed in Germany during the early 1970s. In 1974, he killed a 13-year-old boy. He was convicted of manslaughter and served 3 years of a 4-year prison sentence. In 1979, after moving back to the States, MAUST stabbed a friend while he slept and was accused of attempted murder. But he somehow maintained his freedom, and 2 years later, he drowned 15-year-old Donald Jones. He then stabbed, but didn't kill, a 14-year-old boy. While in prison for the stabbing, MAUST was extradited to Illinois for the Jones murder. He was found unfit to stand trial and spent the next 12 years in mental health facilities and jail while awaiting trial, and received credit for it as time served. It knocked his 35-year-old sentence down to 17 years, and he was released in 1999. The prosecutor fought to keep MAUST incarcerated, and MAUST himself even wrote to the Illinois Department of Corrections telling them that they shouldn't release him. But the agency cut him loose, and in 2001 he once again proved that he can't control his urge to kill. That year, MAUST repeatedly hit someone in the back of the head with a metal pipe, but the person survived and declined to press charges. In 2003, the body of 16-year-old James Regagni was found encased in cement on the serial killer's property. He was charged with killing Regagni and for 2 other murders. It was finally clear that MAUST was right in saying that he belongs in prison, and he was sentenced to 3 life terms. Do you think people are born serial killers, or do you think they slowly become them? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. 5. Andrew Dawson. At just 19 years old, Andrew Dawson stabbed an elderly man to death in Ormskirk, England. He plunged a knife into 91-year-old shopkeeper Henry Walsh in 1981 after entering the store to rob it. By then, the young man already had a reputation around town for stealing money. When Walsh said to Dawson, "I know who you are," it propelled him into a rage. Dawson expressed remorse in court. It didn't spare him from prison, but he saw freedom again in 2001 when he was paroled. He ended up back in custody 3 times over the following years, but managed to avoid returning to prison. The killer's time on the outside would eventually come to an end. In 2011, Dawson went to the homes of 2 neighbors, 66-year-old John David Matthews and 58-year-old Paul Hancock, and asked the men if he could use their washing machines. He stabbed them both to death and left their bodies in their bathtubs. While searching Dawson's home, police found a handwritten confession to one of the murders, which was signed the Angel of Mercy. When asked why he killed the 2 victims, he reportedly told officers that he had experienced the urge to kill. Dawson admitted to the killings in court, but reportedly expressed no remorse. He received a life sentence with no possibility of parole. 4. DARRYL KEMP. Serial killer and rapist DARRYL KEMP was sentenced to death for raping and murdering Marjorie Hipperson in her Los Angeles apartment in 1957. His sentence was commuted to life in 1972, when the Supreme Court of California ruled that the death penalty was unconstitutional. Kemp was paroled in 1978, getting a second chance at freedom that very few people on death row ever see. Almost immediately after his release, he attacked and murdered Armida Wiltsey. Police investigated Kemp but couldn't find any evidence that definitely tied him to the crime, and the case went cold. He went on to rape several women in Texas, and he was sentenced to life in prison. When the Wiltsey case was reopened in 2000, detectives realized that they could test blood found beneath Kemp's fingernails for DNA, as well as hair and other evidence from the crime scene. 3 years later, the results came in. It was a match. Even though Kemp was already in prison for life, he was tried for the murder. In 2009, a jury decided that the 72-year-old deserved to be executed, and he was sentenced to death. 3. Kenneth McDuff. Kenneth Allen McDuff began his life of crime in the early 1960s at age 18, when he was convicted of multiple counts of burglary in Texas. He was released from prison in 1965. Less than a year later, he and an accomplice named Roy Dale Green took 3 teenagers captive. McDuff shot 17-year-old Robert Brand and 15-year-old Mark Dunman. Then he and Green proceeded to rape 16-year-old Edna Louise Sullivan repeatedly, using a 3-foot-long broomstick. McDuff strangled her to death, then dumped her body in some bushes. McDuff was originally sentenced to death, but his sentence was commuted to life when Texas outlawed executions. He hired a lawyer who collected evidence pointing the finger at Green as the murderer, rather than the accomplice. The parole board thought McDuff could contribute to society and granted parole in 1989. Kenneth allegedly began killing again 3 days after his release, but he was never charged with murdering the victim. After returning to prison for a parole violation and being re-released, he went on a killing spree, torturing as many as 6 prostitutes to death over a 5-month span. Police eventually identified McDuff as a suspect in the murders, which were happening in different parts of Texas. He slipped away to Kansas City, Missouri, where he began working at a garbage collection company under the alias Richard Fowler. A co-worker recognized McDuff after he was featured on America's Most Wanted, and he was sent back to Texas to face justice. He was executed in 1998. 2. Arthur Shawcross. In 1972, Arthur Shawcross raped and killed 2 children, aged 8 and 10, in his hometown of Waterton, New York. He took a plea bargain that allowed him to plead guilty to manslaughter in exchange for a 25-year sentence. After serving 14 years, he was paroled early. Prison staff had determined that he was no longer a threat to society, despite the heinous nature of his crimes. Shawcross moved to Rochester in response to a public outcry about his release, and went on to commit at least 12 more murders throughout 1988 and 1989. He drove through the streets, targeting prostitutes and earning himself the nickname of the Genesee River Killer. His first victim of this second spate of crimes was a 27-year-old sex worker named Dorothy Blackburn, whom he strangled and tossed into the river. The murders continued from there and went unsolved for a long time. Investigators looked into possible suspects, but authorities had sealed Shawcross's record after his prison release to prevent people in Rochester from finding out about his history and panicking. He was finally caught after his van was connected to the crimes, and someone managed to get the plate number. Shawcross confessed to 11 murders and received a 250-year sentence. He died in prison in 2008 at 63 years old. 1. Desmond Lee. Desmond Lee was a teen when his boyfriend broke up with him, and he left their shared home in Bradford, England in 1989. The ex went back to his former lover, and Lee's landlady, Shirley Carr, supposedly taunted him about the split. Lee, who had been drinking heavily, became full of rage and pinned Ms. Carr to the floor. He suffocated her to death and was sentenced to life, but only spent 14 years in prison for it. Less than 5 years after being released in 2004, Lee murdered his lover, 51-year-old Christopher Pratt. The two had met at a gay sauna months earlier. Lee killed Pratt at the victim's home by breaking his neck and voice box. He then took his lover's credit cards and used them to pay bills and buy food, alcohol, and other items. The next day, Lee returned to the flat for Pratt's naked body and dumped it on a roadside. A jogger discovered the victim's remains 11 days later. Lee was captured on surveillance footage, which showed him arriving at Pratt's home on the day of the murder. At his trial, he claimed that he accidentally killed Pratt when he leaned over in the middle of having sex and unknowingly crushed the man's neck. The jury found Lee guilty, and he was sentenced to life. This time, the judge said he will truly spend his remaining years behind bars. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.